Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu, sitting in for Riz Khan. Are spy romances merely the stuff of fiction, or does life sometimes get to imitate art? Robert Baer was a CIA agent running operations in the Middle East. Dana Williamson was a CIA expert shooter. The two met while on a covert mission in war-torn Sarajevo during the 90s. His job was to spy on Hezbollah. Her job was to provide surveillance and act as a bodyguard. It may sound like a Hollywood spy romance, but this love story was for real. Today we talk to the two former spies about international espionage, covert operations and undercover romance, and why they decided to give it all up. A reminder, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or email, and of course we also welcome your phone calls on the show. Joining me now from San Francisco to talk more about their story are Bob and Dayna Baer. Bob Baer worked for the CIA for 20 years. His book, See No Evil, inspired the 2005 Academy Award-winning film Syria. The movie's protagonist, played by George Clooney, is based on Robert Baer. He and his wife Dana have just released a new book, The Company We Keep, a husband and wife true-life spy story, which gives a rare insight into the lives of CIA agents. Well, welcome to both of you to the show.
Thank you.
Now, the two of you met in Bosnia, as I've just mentioned, in the 1990s, Sarajevo. It was a time of war. Robert, you were chasing Hezbollah operatives at the time, and Dana, you were there in support of Robert's goals, chasing those Hezbollah operatives. So Dana, tell us about that first meeting and what you thought of Robert. And I saw a little note here that initially you thought he was a little nutty.
Well, initially, yes, I definitely had my reservations. You know, my training was all about how to blend in, how to not attract any attention, and you know, I'm told to go meet him at a restaurant and he's driving a lime green car with Orangina written down the side. It was definitely just against any way that I would have worked.
But I thought spies are supposed to be unobtrusive. You're supposed to blend into the crowd. A lime green car.
Well, I had a good reason for it. I thought I did. You know, and it's like, what spy would drive a car like this? So it takes attention off you. And I figured, you know, if anything went bad, Orangina would get the flack. But that was the idea, at least.
Right. You know, the common perception of spies is that they lead this glamorous life, hopping on and off planes to exotic destinations, having loads of money at their disposal, dressing in fine clothing, etc. But when I read your book, in reality, it's a very stressful life. And Dana, what did you find most stressful about it? The fact that you were away from your family for such long periods, or the fact that you become somebody else? You can't even tell your closest family members who you are and what you do.
Well, that just goes hand in hand, and you know, it really takes a toll. You're away from home. You can't call home. You can't send emails, and then when you come home, you can't tell people where you've been or what you do, and in most cases, you can't tell family who you work for. So it really creates a divide and a barrier. It's hard to maintain any sort of relationship under those sort of circumstances.
And Robert, did you find the same thing? Because I know that both of you had marriages that ended before you met each other, of course. So it must have taken a big toll on your life as well.
It was disastrous, I think. I was assigned to Beirut in the 80s in Damascus. And you know, I'd come home and people wouldn't recognize, you know, they would, you know, so why are you back? They didn't care where you were. The children became very alienated, and they still are to this day. It's very much the Odyssey. You go away and you've got to fight for what's yours when you get back. But in my case, and I think Dana's as well, it just doesn't work.
Dana, how did you initially become a spy? How did you come to work for the CIA? Is it just a case of applying for a job like any other civil servant in Washington would do?
Basically, almost it is. I actually applied through an on-campus sort of, at a recruitment center on campus at University of California, Los Angeles. And, you know, it takes a very long time to get hired by the CIA. They have to do extensive background checks. So, you know, I threw a resume in a pile, and, you know, it was probably a year and a half later when they finally contacted me.
And did you find, once you'd been recruited and trained, etc., that it's more difficult or easier for a woman to be a spy? Mainly because I think, you know, there again, there's the public perception, or misperception, I should say, that spies are always men, not women.
No, you know, I think it's easier. It's in fact, I got lots of jobs because I was a woman, because it's easier for a woman to blend in a lot of cases, and you're just a lot less suspecting. You can sit at a bus stop for hours on end. You can sit in a car and adjust your makeup and look in the rearview mirror, and you're just a lot less suspicious than a man would be.
And Robert, did you ever find that questions of morality arose when you were doing your job? For instance, you're doing something, you're acting in the interest of the United States, in the interest of the United States government, you're carrying out policy, you're carrying out orders, etc. But do you ever feel at times, what I'm doing here is wrong, I shouldn't be doing this?
Well, I normally agreed with the policy coming out of Washington, and often our actions would lead to the death of people. Yes, I did. And on a day-to-day basis, you are betraying people because you don't go out in the world as a CIA agent. You tell them you're doing something else. You are trying to manipulate them into working for you, to steal secrets, and ultimately you're putting their lives at risk, and that could be it for them, and they don't really know it till they're too far into the relationship. So the answer is yes.
And Dayna, did you find that as well?
Well, I had a very different job from Bob. My job wasn't so much recruiting sources or asking people to do things for me, but it was a lot more. I was supporting Bob's operations, like, for example, in Sarajevo, we were tracking Hezbollah, and Hezbollah had targeted our chief there, and we had taken the chief out in the middle of the night, and then it was our job to go in and try to find out who had actually targeted him. So we were running equipment that could read conversations through walls, and that was sort of, my job was more technical in nature.
Yeah, and how did the two of you, adopt a covert position in a place like Sarajevo? I mean, here you have an American couple who are living in Sarajevo. I'm not sure whether you speak the language there, but didn't you stick out like sore thumbs? I mean, wasn't there a suspicion right from the outset that these people could be American spies?
Well, I think, in my case, a lot of my training was, how do you blend in? As soon as you get somewhere, you figure out what kind of car is everybody driving, what kind of clothes are they wearing, what color is their hair, and you just adapt as quickly as possible. But at the same time, yes, you're trying to, you're not engaging, at least in my case, I'm not engaging in conversation with locals and trying to just stay as unobtrusive as possible.
Yeah, and once you met Bob, initially you were told you were going to meet a person called Harold, but I understand that as soon as you met him in that restaurant that you were talking about earlier on, he stuck his arm out and
broke cover
said,
immediately.
Yeah, he blew his cover saying he was Bob. So was it love at first sight?
Oh, no, it was definitely a rocky start. In fact, we worked together for the entire operation in Sarajevo, and I never told him my true name, so I was always an alias. And he was living in a house in the suburbs that he'd rented. There was no electricity and no water. There was no romance. There wasn't one. There wasn't time for it, and it just it wasn't something that I felt at any point during that when we were working together there.
And Bob, what about you? Did you feel when you first saw Dayna, this is the woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life with?
I got that idea pretty fast, and one time we drove out and had to drive through the Alps, and we had what was called a tactical set that I could communicate with Langley. And I said, hey, we got absolutely nothing to do. We're on our way to Geneva. Let's go skiing outside Zermatt. And this was in the summer. There's a glacier there. And I could see this twinkle in her eye, and she said, yeah, why not? And, I didn't say anything at the time, so we went skiing a couple days. And
Dayna, when did you realize that relationship with Robert was actually going to go beyond what I could, I suppose, call a professional relationship?
Oh gosh, when we left Sarajevo, when the operation was done there, I just thought that I would never see him again. The CIA is a big, huge place, and it was just entirely probable we'd be working on the other sides of the world for many, many years. But we accidentally ran into each other at headquarters. He, called out my name, which was my alias, Riley, and I had to turn and say, hey, it's Dayna. And we went to dinner that night. He asked me to dinner just to sort of talk over, sort of do a debrief on our operation. And at the end of dinner, he asked me to go skiing in Switzerland, and I accepted, and things sort of snowballed after that.
And that's where the courtship started it properly, I guess. We've got a caller on the line. This is Dale calling from Virginia. Dale, go ahead with your question.
No, I'm sorry, I have no question. I'm simply wondering, I mean, having worked for the agency many years ago, I'm sort of saddened that these people are exposing possibly many other colleagues who could be put in danger. And what's their point? To make a lot of money on a book about a life that they were privileged to serve this nation, and what they're doing is not a good idea to expose us. It's disloyal.
Okay, let me. Thanks for your call. Let me put that to them. Robert.
Yeah, that's easy to answer. This book was cleared by the CIA. Any identities were changed. Every single word was cleared. The CIA, in fact, if this person really had worked there, doesn't mind books at all. It encouraged several books on Afghanistan. It's encouraged employees to write books about Iraq. Some of those employees are actually working in the CIA. The Ames books about the mole were also supported by the CIA, so that's not the way the CIA looks at it.
I also think, part of it was the reason, or one of the reasons we wanted to write it too, was to pretty much accurately reflect what it's like for all those people and families that spend their lives working for the CIA. And the book really talks about the costs associated with CIA employment. So it's a chance to tell what it's like for all our colleagues, okay, without revealing names.
Right, okay. I want to fast forward now to the present. And Robert, you spent many, many years in your career living and working in the Middle East. What do you make of the current sweep of events that are taking place there right now?
Well, first of all, it came as a total and complete surprise to everybody I know in the Middle East, Syrians, Libyans, Saudis. This simply came out of nowhere in Tunisia. And it's a virus that's caught on in each and every place where this breaks out is going to be different. In Yemen, you have tribal differences, Libya's tribal differences, but in Syria, you have sectarian differences, Shia and Sunni. And I don't think anybody knows where this is going to go and where it's going to stop. I think the Middle East is going to be transformed once and for all.
You say you were caught completely by surprise. Was the United States government also caught on the back foot?
Well, it was. I mean, we're dealing with ephemera here. A vendor lighting himself on fire. Who could predict that? And seeing the military in Egypt undercut Mubarak fairly quickly, that came as a bit as a surprise. Now that it's happened, I can tell you the worst case scenarios.
Well, what are those worst case scenarios?
Oh, let's take Syria. If the demonstrations continue there and the minority regime is under attack, I think you're going to see the army reacting in the same way that Gaddafi did. I think Syria will split between the Alawite minority and the Sunni. The Muslim Brotherhood will reappear. This will spread into Lebanon. It will not do anything good for Jordan and Iraq. And then this will hit the Persian side. I mean, the Iranians as well as the Arab side of the Gulf. I mean, these divisions exist, and they will get worse.
Is there a possibility that in Syria you might get the army that might adopt the same position that the Egyptian army adopted and say, well, look, we're not going to take on these demonstrations. We're not going to put them down. We're not going to keep, well, in this Egyptian case, Hosni Mubarak in power any longer. And in Syria, say Bashar al-Assad, we're not going to support you any longer. Can that happen? Will the army take that position?
No, it's a different army. Every unit in the Syrian army is led by an Alawite. The army is not looked at favorably by Syrians, most Syrians. They look at it as a palace guard, and one demand the Syrian street would have is to change the army, change that system. It's a different army, it's a different circumstances, and it risks becoming much more violent than Egypt. And I emphasize risks. I can't tell you where it's going to go.
Was it an intelligence failure then on the part of the United States?
It was an intelligence failure on everyone's part.
I mean, I presume that there must be people either at the CIA or the National Security Council or somewhere, even at the State Department, who prepare these scenarios to see what would happen if this happens, how do we respond to it, if that happens, and give the administration all the kinds of options that it would have at its disposal. But in this case, what you're saying is they didn't think this would happen at all.
Well, remember, the United States is involved in two very large wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. The federal government is under an enormous amount of pressure, the CIA, the State Department, and in particular the military. And there is just no time for anyone to say, what happens if Tunisia goes up in flames? Will it affect Algeria, or will it affect Egypt? It was just, there is not enough people to do it. So I'm going to take the side of the government and say this wasn't a failure.
Okay, we have another caller on the line. This is John calling from Jordan. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Baer, we appreciate your commentary on CNN, and so I'm, for one, are appreciative of your books. The second point is, with regards to the CIA's covert operations on the ground in Libya, what's your thoughts on the strategy there and where they're heading with that strategy?
Look, you know, frankly, the CIA hates covert action anywhere. It doesn't work well. And what happens is the CIA gets dragged in to problems the White House can't solve with the military or State Department. You know, it's an act of desperation in Libya. I know why the administration went in. I know why the Arab League supported it, because it couldn't stand by and watch a massacre in Benghazi. So the first thing they did is put a no-fly zone, completely logical, but not particularly effective. And now, if it's true, these reports are bringing in the CIA, they're trying to do something with the Libyan rebels. The problem is they're not cohesive, they don't have any battlefield experience, and they're just people out of universities and professionals and the rest of it that don't know how to fire a Kalashnikov. And the administration is playing, and the West is, and the Arab League is playing catch-up ball. You know, I just wish that there was somebody in the inner circle, Gaddafi's circle, that would send him off into exile, and then we could sit down and negotiate.
You know, there are some who believe that what is happening in Libya right now is not simply an attempt by an opposition to topple a dictator, but it's in fact a civil war, and the United States is in fact taking sides in this civil war.
I think absolutely we are taking sides in the civil war. I think it was inadvertent. We certainly don't favor one tribe over another or one faction. And yes, we are getting dragged into a quagmire. And I could foresee it getting much worse. Gaddafi is not going to give up. His clan is not going to give up, and they are the best organized. They can put soldiers into these cities, and they're understanding how to defeat this air cover. That's what disturbs me, is a Somalia-like situation in Libya, which could go on for a very long time.
So then, should the international community, which approved that resolution at the United Nations, which authorized what is going on right now, should they go one step further and supply weapons to the rebels?
The problem is the training. I mean, you can give them guns and rocket launchers and the rest of it, but it takes years of training. And, you know, and it takes a lot more people than the CIA can put on the ground, or anybody really. And what I'm afraid is that if this fails, then there's going to be an enormous pressure to bring in foreign forces into Benghazi.
There is one other question, and this concerns the United States particularly. Can the forces that are being used there right now, NATO forces, under the NATO umbrella, can they be withdrawn without Gaddafi being toppled? Wouldn't that seriously affect, I suppose, American prestige and power?
Yeah, this is the problem with when you go into a place to protect a civilian population and you haven't resolved it safely, you can't very well pull out. And this is why it is a quagmire. You can't leave. We cannot let, at this point, a massacre occur. And the assumption is Gaddafi would conduct one if he retook the country. So we are stuck in Libya.
Okay, we have another caller from Bahrain. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, I was wondering why he used the word virus, because to describe something that is the yearning for freedom, democracy, and all the values that the United States preaches. I mean, you know, CIA cannot predict everything that happens in the world, nor can any clandestine
operation. I mean, the human spirit and the yearning for freedom and all those values is something that cannot always be calculated. It cannot be quantified. So why use the word virus? And by the way, I'm very happy that you did write the book, because it puts a human face on, people who are normally demonized. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what we tried to do with this book. You'll see it's not very political, and there's the only culprits in this book are my wife and me, in the sense we didn't really understand the world, and we grew up in the CIA, and it was our innocence being exposed to the way the world works. But anyhow, to go back to your question, it's a virus in the sense that the conditions were right for change in the Middle East. High wheat prices, high unemployment, people just tired of tyrannical governments, and frankly, people tired of the United States, intervening in these places and not introducing true democracy or the rule of law. And the United States in a lot of these countries is looked at as simply a colonialist power. I won't argue that, but aside from that, times were ripe, and in the Middle East we did reach the tipping point. But more than that is the demonstrators, I think it's fascinating, are not resorting to violence, nor are they resorting right now to the Muslim Brotherhood or any of these radical ideologies that have been so driven the Middle East. And this has changed, and this is the good news, is the demonstrators are rather disciplined.
Dayna, I want to get back to you and back to family life. You have adopted, both of you rather, have adopted a child very recently. You adopted that child in Pakistan. How did that come about?
Well, when we decided that we basically needed a family of our own, we thought about where we would like to adopt from, and we wanted to adopt from someplace where we had been and where we'd worked a bit and where we knew we'd go back to, so that we could raise her a bit in her culture and possibly know any relatives that she might have. So that's essentially how we started, and we networked quite a bit with all the people we've met over the years, and we were able to find someone who had worked with the UN who had found her. She'd been abandoned to a parish outside of Islamabad. So that's how that came about.
So you're a mother and wife right now. Is it possible to be an ex-CIA agent?
Well, it is possible. We're trying. Sometimes it's hard for other people outside to let it go, or let you go, basically. But we're trying.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Robert?
A lot of people still believe that I've got to have connections with the CIA, and I got people that want to do coups in Africa, and I've even had the Italian mob get in touch with me to solve a problem. And it's hard for people to believe that you can leave the CIA, resign from the CIA, and try to turn yourselves into writers. But that's all we are. And with each book, you're getting in better style. You're talking less about substance in the CIA, more about politics or personal life, and it's becoming easier by the day.
So you still get people calling you up and asking you to perform all kinds of very strange duties. I did see in the book in places you had some very strange requests.
Well, we went to Iraq during the war in 2003, and we were invited to spend the beginning of the war with a tribe in Ramadi, and at some point Saddam Hussein and his half-brother Barzan showed up and wanted to talk to us. They were on the run at that time, just assuming that we could get to the CIA and assuming that we could cut some sort of deal where they wouldn't end up as prisoners. I mean, it was crazy, but that's the past you drag with you.
Okay. We are going to have to leave it there. Time's caught up with us. Thanks to both of you for being with us, and good luck with the book. The book is The Company We Keep, A Husband and Wife True Life Spy Story. And thanks for being with us. A reminder, you can watch a podcast of the show on iTunes. Today we feature Riz Khan's conversation with the renowned Haitian novelist Edwidge Danticat on what the future holds for Haiti. On the next show, we talk to supermodel turned actress and activist Leah Kebede on her work on maternal rights and her new film on the controversial subject of female genital mutilation. Make sure you tune in for that. That's coming up next time.